All right. Today is Friday, February 20th. My name is Gene Perry. Welcome to Free Hands Friday. We are joined by an all-star cast of NS players and Chapman stick players from all over the world. Um, and I'm so pleased that so many people have made it out today. We've got Dan Chapman, our guest, Dean Kobayashi, Kevin, Kyle, representing Sweden, Paris here, Randy. Okay, we enabled the animation, so all bets are off. And of course, me and Rob here representing Free Hands Friday. Kyle, I'm going to hand it off to you, and I'm looking forward to finding more out about Dean.
All right, yeah, Dean. So I was checking out your blog recently and about how you went to NAMM and stuff. But I thought to start it off, why don't you tell us a little bit about your musical history and were you a bass player first? Were you a guitar player first? How long you been playing the stick?
My musical journey, I guess, started with, I'm trying to think, probably when I was very young. I won't say I was like totally into music when I was really young, but probably I think it was about 6, 7 years old. My sister was taking piano lessons, and I remember seeing my sister play, some cool songs, and I was like, oh, I want to do that. And after a little bit of nagging with my parents, it probably took a year or two, but they finally thought I was old enough to start a little bit of piano. It was all classical, though. It was, I don't know if people know of the kawaii music method, which is a lot of just repetition, just learning in the book and taking it step by step. And I was kind of in and out of that. I didn't do too much. Later on, a friend of mine, several years later, another friend of mine was probably still in elementary. He had a really cool teacher who actually came to the house and gave lessons, and he's like, oh, she'll do whatever songs you want to do. And I was like, sweet. So I got that teacher. We started playing just more interesting songs. Nothing really revolutionary or anything like that, but just more like I did like the Rocky theme song. It was that song from Cats. I think my sister and I both did that. Memory. Everybody loves that song from Cats, right? It's not just me, right? No. Okay.
I laughed. I cried.
Yes, everybody cried at that part of the musical. But yeah, I did some really nice, neat songs on there, and then when I was in middle school, my middle school actually had a class called rock band. It was an elective, and I went in as a keyboard guy, and there was probably like 3 keyboardists. There was a guitar player and a bassist and what else was there? A drummer. And at a certain point, the teacher just goes, "Here you go. Here's the bass. This is how we're playing Beatles songs. And here's the C, here's the G, here's the F. This is when you play it." And I said, okay. And that was my start into like a guitar kind of style instrument. I never really picked one up before then. And
So bass before guitar?
Yeah, bass before guitar. I've always been bassist first.
There you go. Represent. Me too.
Yeah, keeping it real.
That's right.
And so I really kind of dug the bass. I loved how it felt. It was relatively simple. It had 4 strings on it. Like, it can't get any easier, right? Well, not really, but I just really dug what I could do on the bass. And it's one of those instruments that if you want to play in a band or something, and they just have to tell you what chords they're playing, and you're like, okay, I know what the root note is. And
The cool thing about bass, when I talk to my students about, maybe if a guitar student wants to try out the bass, or if they're just starting out bass, you say, yeah, it's really easy to start because all you're doing is playing individual notes, and you can play a ton of songs just doing that.
mhm.
But then there's just as much room to grow and develop and dig deeper as with guitar or any other instrument.
Yeah, and I was just dangerous enough at that point where when I got into high school, I was still kind of playing a little keyboard and then and then I didn't even own a bass, but a friend did, and and he's like, hey, uh, or if anybody would be like, hey, can you want to join us and just come on and play bass? It was just really easy to just kind of do that and just jump in. Um,
There's
yeah, and
always
then
more of a need for bass players than guitarists.
yeah, it's funny, and I just really dug it. And then in high school, my sophomore year, I was in a band and I played no. Actually, I played guitar, believe it or not, and I was horrible. I mean, like, I can't do bar chords, so that's a problem in playing guitar. And
Still can't do bar chords?
I still can't do bar chords. Like, forget it. I can finally do it on a ukulele, but
Good step.
on a guitar, like I don't know what it is about holding that finger down and trying to hold down like all those strings. It just blows my mind. So I had a very hard time. Of course, I could do power chords all day long. Those were
Oh,
fun.
yeah. Yeah. Power chord. Kurt Cobain can do it. Anyone can. Right?
So
So, now, in your blog, it said that you've been playing since about 2000, 99, 2000. You've been playing the stick.
yeah, so I picked up the stick. When was it? 2 years ago. It was Thanksgiving weekend in 2012.
Okay. And it was the NS stick?
Yeah, so it was the NS stick. I'm actually never played the normie stick that you all play. I'm just kidding.
Well, I'm an NS stick player also.
Yes,
On the inverted fifths and everything, that's a whole different world.
yeah,
And I've messed around on one before, and I looked at the method book also. I can't remember the one that I did, but it's pretty interesting about all the different shapes that you can possibly get with the inverted fifth or the standard tuning for the 10 string or the grand stick.
mhm,
You can get a simple bass line along with a little bit of chords, all while you're playing the lead part.
yeah,
And the NS stick has a completely different purpose too. You can get a nice fat bass line going on and play a little accompaniment chords or play some melody along with it. Looks like we're losing your video. It's going in and out there, Deep.
my video's going in and out. Everybody else can
That
hear?
might be your connection, Kyle. There's a little bit of lag, so that's
Okay.
carry on. We're working at the speed of the internet.
All right. So um, now you've been playing for a couple of years. I wanted to ask you about how often you change your strings, adjust your truss rod, or any other part of your action. I've had my stick a couple of years now too, my NS stick, and I find myself changing the truss rod every couple of months. So, the weather's pretty extreme out here in Utah. I can get 100 plus degrees during the summer and then get below zero during the winter. So it changes, temperature and humidity changes pretty quick up here. But I wondered how often you change your action, change your truss rod.
Well, let's see here. I just like, as far as the action, like the nut, the bridge, these kinds of things, I like never touch it. It's pretty much good to go all the time. But the truss, though, I do it by feel. Um, as soon as I start playing and I notice some notes aren't ringing out like they should, or
Getting a little
um,
fresh.
yeah, a buzz I didn't hear before, or it just feels a little higher, like I feel like I'm really hitting it harder than I'm usually used to. That's when I'll just pull out the wrench and I'll turn it one way. In my brain I think, okay, so the string feels like it's too far from the board. So that means I got to bend it this way, which means I got to tighten the truss. Okay, so that's a righty-tighty. Okay, that's how my brain works, right? So I tighten it up, and I only do it like a 16th or an 18th of a turn.
Yeah.
18th, a 16th or an 8th of a turn, and usually that's all it takes for me is one way or the other. Just like if I go a quarter, it just goes way too far. But it's just these really minute changes, and you know, different from like guitars and things. And you know, we always talk about the truss rod with the stick because guitarists and bassists who come to the instrument are like freaking out about touching the truss rod, and it's really not that big of a deal on the stick, and it's actually necessary for you to adjust it on your own because that's the one thing that will change, you know, with humidity, temperature, all that kind of stuff. And you know, don't be afraid of it, but always remember what you did so you can always reverse it. You know, on like Stickus.com, people are asking these questions. Hey, what should I do? I've been doing X, Y, Z, and I did this, this, and this, and it's still sounding bad. It's like, okay, well, try and get it back to where you started, right? You know, so my first piece of advice is always, hey, write down what you've changed. Do small changes. Okay, I made an 1/8 of a turn on the truss. I changed this nut here by a quarter turn. Then at least you can take it back, because most of the sticks out there are ordered directly from, you know, either Stick Enterprises or was recently set up by Stick Enterprises, or the person who is reselling it had it set up by Stick Enterprises and never touched anything. So the chances of your stick to be already set up is pretty good. And so that's my advice to people. But yeah, as far as adjustments go, that's the only thing I do. And then if that really doesn't change the tone or whatever that I'm just kind of experiencing, then I go to strings. That's the next thing I go to usually. And I've been changing strings about once every 4 to 6 months, I'd say.
Really? That's a. I mean, it all depends on how often you play, which I imagine you play pretty often. But that seems like a pretty frequent string changing, like every 4 months.
Yeah, no, that's on the short end. It's really closer probably to 6 months.
Now so you like that crisper tone in it. You like kind of that easier tone that you get from those.
Yeah, you know, I remember from my bass days that I liked the sound of the bass sounded best after about a week of playing it. You know, after you change the strings, and that's about the same with the stick. With the NS, I think, is you still have a little break-in period with the strings. I don't like it to be super bright, but I don't want it to sound like those dub guys in Jamaica that just dead strings, and then you lose all the intonation, and I can't go that far. But
So,
yeah.
well, did you ever play Don's 12-string Chapman stick? Has anyone here like played that? Because he'll leave his bass strings on for years. So I mean,
I've picked up Don's NS. I played his Chapman stick also. I don't play much on it. I just you know, hitting it. And Don's NS, at least, I felt was, you know, from a expert point of view, and Don not being an expert in it, I'm joking. You know, and actually, when we were
right? What does Don Schiff know about the NS?
Don who? But sorry, Don. No, both Gary and I over at Freehands 2014, we both were playing Don's stick and being like, strings feel really high, and I think Don, coming from a very, very bass, you know, old school bass, he's okay with that, and he plays obviously very wonderfully on these instruments, and he plays it a little higher, and I think he slams it a little harder with his fingers than most players.
I've played or I've changed the strings on my stick once. You know, like I said, I've had that instrument for just a couple years. But the first time that I changed it, I was missing that duller tone that I had. I feel like you leave the strings on there for a while and they die some, and you get a little rounder tone, a little something that sounds a little more like a bass being plucked instead of being tapped. Something that could be used in more genres, a little more widespread use for it.
Yeah, well, I have a kind of a concept that whenever, I want to make sure that my instrument can sound the way that I shape it over, I get a tone or sound. I want to be able to replicate that whenever I want. And so my fear is that if the strings are 2 years old and then the string breaks or, something happens, then I'm not going to get that tone again for another 2 years, possibly.
Okay.
And so that's part of what I like to do, is just to make sure that I'm not overextending the life of the string, and so that I'm in that kind of pocket where, hey, I can wait a week, or even with a super bright tone, I can still get away with it, and I'll just live with it for a week. And so that's kind of my thought process on that. And so I do change strings about, at least once every 6 months.
Okay. Yeah. That's some good logic behind that. So maybe you could. I was checking out your videos, and you have that video of the Jimi Hendrix cover where you're doing the slapping / tapping on it. I was wondering if you could maybe talk about that some.
Sure.
For some reason, I could only see your profile picture with in a circle and stuff coming out of it, so I can't see the video. Do you?
I see you just fine. I see you just fine.
Okay.
We have just a little, Kyle, you may have a little bit of latency
out
there in the hills of Utah, so.
Yeah, up in this rural land.
So tell us about Hendrix. Tell us about the Hendrix tune.
So the Hendrix tune came about, there was a contest I came across online for the Jimi Hendrix Experience Hendrix. They have a website, they do tours, all that kind of stuff. And it was a contest to see, and if you win, you get to go on one of their stages and you get to play with, all these amazing players. And I was like, wow, that would be really cool. And at the time I was working on this technique where, I like to have long sustaining notes, and slap bass, slap and plucking is percussive, short, mostly, kind of sounds, and I love to have that layer, another layer of sustaining notes underneath it or above it, whatever you want to think, on a kind of a guitar tone. And so I was working on that, and then in the beginning it was just holding down a note with my right hand, with like my pinky or ring finger, and then plucking and slapping with the same hand, but while holding, that note, and then plucking it. I can probably pull up my NS and show that to you. Lower this thing so you can see me a little better. So I was working on that technique. So I would basically hold, so that's my ring finger right now holding it, and then I would so that really made a really cool sound, and I remember kind of showing Don it, I was like, he's like, oh, cool, and then and that's cool and everything, but then I was like, well, wouldn't it be really cool to play a melody instead of just one long sustaining note? And that contest came at the same time, and I was like, oh, and I remember Jaco Pastorius playing Third Stone, and amazing rendition, and so that's why I decided on that song and decided to do that. And so what happens there is I would hold the note with my ring finger or pinky or whatever, and then as I'm slapping, I slide my hand up and down, and I'm actually plucking. I'm getting under strings also and pulling strings as I slap, and, doing that whole thing. So I would slide up and down and get those notes with my ring finger or pinky or whatever that's in that area at the time, and then just keep sliding up while slapping and plucking. And that's how that was born. And I've actually just recently adapted that same technique, minimal change to the bass line to an original song, an outro to an original song that I wrote. So I'll hope to have that recorded soon and up and available.
Cool. Well, that Hendrix cover was an awesome video. It shows, you know, some more steps in progress for tapping instruments. Yeah, I wish I could have seen that. For some reason, I can't see anybody. I could just make it.
Well, we'll just have to get together in person. You know.
There we go. So, tell me about the recent NAMM.
The recent what?
NAMM? You went to NAMM?
Oh, yeah. Actually, I didn't go into NAMM. I went down to Anaheim to hope to get into NAMM, but I wasn't able to secure any passes, so I didn't actually go in. But I had a couple things that I wanted to do. Let me put this down. There was the stick night. I definitely wanted to play. You know, there was the other stick night right after Free Hands that happened. I was like, you know, I wanted to go to that. I live in Northern California. I live in the San Jose area, and getting down there is about 5 or 6 hour drive, which isn't totally out of reach. But I also do, from my work, I do some business travel down there as well. So I'll incorporate that so that I can go to these things as well sometimes. So kind of guilty of that. But the NAMM one, I actually drove down. I took everything with me, and the nice thing about driving is you can take your whole pedal board. And so I have a kind of a real big pedal board. I took that with me and got to play. Gene let me play a couple tunes in the open mic portion.
Yeah, did you host the open mic?
What's that?
Did you host the open mic?
Yeah, right before the show, Gene lost his voice, and Gene was like, "Hey, can you mind if you be the MC for this?" And hey, I'm
yelling at Stickists all day long, and then I was like, "Dean likes to talk, like I like to talk." It's getting us to stop talking about the stick.
Yeah, exactly. Gene's like, hey, take only like 2 minutes, okay? And I'm like talking. I'm like, you know, I made some jokes and nobody laughed, and you know, just
the tough.
It was a lot of fun, you know. I got to meet, you know, all the players that were there and the players that weren't playing. Also, you know, it was just so much fun to meet everybody, just say hi. And then, you know, like, they look at me and they go, hey, Dean. I'm like, oh, how do you know me? And they're like, well, I see your picture on everything. You know, I have that, my picture is like, you know, on my Facebook, on my Stickist.com, you know, and so everybody recognizes me, and, you know, so that's really, really cool to be able to meet these guys, and they already know me by name, and it's maybe scary a little bit.
Well, this community has been awesome from my experience.
Oh, yeah.
Great musicians, just a warm embrace pretty much anywhere you go with it. So, hey, finally, I'm able to see you on the video again. I was going to ask you a little bit more about your slapping thing. So when you're playing it, just because I couldn't see the image earlier, when you're doing the slapping, are you doing it more with, are you kind of doing it like a wrist thing, or are you doing it more with just the joint of your thumb right here?
That's a good question. Let me find out.
Kyle, you need to back up a little bit or lower your camera so we can see your stick as well.
Oh, okay. So what I did was get out of viewing myself, and then I can see Dean in the little box down there, but I can't see. So you tell me when I can't see myself in here.
Got it. So you plugging in, Dean? Is that it? You're gonna plug it in?
Yeah, I'm plugging in a little bit.
Cool. All right. All right. Yeah, and at some point we should cover your pedal board as well, because that's kind of
Okay.
fun to see the way you set that up.
Yeah, I've got a movable camera, so I can take you on a tour.
Okay. Cool. I can't wait.
So the slap technique, the right hand's super easy. You know, just hold the note. I'm sorry, left hand. Okay, left hand is, you know, just holding the bass note. So, you know, whatever. And then my right hand, I use usually my ring finger. And so I'll find a note. Let's see, what's a good note here? And then, so I hold that note, just sustain it. This is how I started. And then my slap line is like, and so I'll hold that note.
So you're using a little bit of your wrist motion there, but it's mostly your thumb.
Yeah, I mean, the twist motion that usually used when you know, slap like this, I don't know if you can see this.
Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah, it really isn't, it is a little bit inhibited, but because you're holding the note with your ring finger, but this twisty motion is pretty much still there. You know, because that's the motion that usually I use. Right?
Yeah.
But instead of slapping, you know, where we're used to at the, you know, at the bridge end of the neck, instead of that, I'm way up on the neck now. And so if I like, let's see here. I don't remember how to play the song. Okay, there it is.
I'm just looking at it down in the thumbnail. So,
okay.
Are you?
Yeah, it's a really weird action, like a motion to do, because, you know, we're used to being very free with all our fingers when we're, you know, as a bassist, and to have that constraint of that, now you're anchoring your hand with one note here, and then trying to hit the string is another thing. It takes some practice, and I'm awesome, and so that's why I do it.
Hey, so that high G that you're hitting, that fifth fret on your D string, are you popping that, or are you just humming that?
Oh, the low B string?
No, the G. The note, with that riff that you were playing, you're hitting a G in there, the higher G, sounded like a pop.
Yeah. I'm popping it.
To do that, or are you just hitting it with your thumb?
No, I'm only hitting the low B string with my thumb, or the E, whatever you're on, and then the octave, I'll pop it. So it's just like slapping, you know, and then. But you do have to use a little bit of your nail to get under the string, and if you don't have a nail,
especially on a amplitude string,
so even without a nail, sometimes I cut my nails really thin. You just have to really kind of grip underneath the string a little bit to really pop the string.
Yeah. And when you're doing that on fretboard, that takes some practice, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's a really odd feeling, because you know, we're used to down here where you can really just grip underneath there and just, you know, rip that string out, and that's how a lot of you know, bassists play is down. But you can do the same thing up here, and the tone changes too. You know, the tone's a little bit different, but luckily I found that on a stick the tone is not as drastic of a change if you know, pluck or pop the string here as you do down here is minimal compared to like a bass guitar. Like if you tried that up here, just the way it's set up and everything, you know, you really need to get that energy for the bass guitar. But for these things, it doesn't really take much. You don't really need to get under there too much, and so. and also because the action is so low, you know, whenever you just even touch a string, it plays the note, right? So like the downbeat on the slap, on a bass guitar you would slap that, you know, be like boom. But on here you don't slap it because there's just enough energy from. So the one is no slap, and so you don't even have to slap it. But on subsequent notes, I will slap it. So just the first one. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Oh no, especially when you have such low action, slapping and tapping have pretty similar tones.
I wanted to add something to that, and that is that with the stick, like with the NS, the nature of the instrument, it's a finesse instrument, and so all that windmilling power that you need for a guitar is really unnecessary. And with the stick, because your hands are playing two roles, you're putting the string into motion, and then you're also selecting the quality of the note that you're going to be playing. And so really, you're doing two things at once. As stick players, we don't stop to think about it, but really that's in essence what we're doing. And Dean, what you're doing is I think, were you fretting stuff with your thumb as well at some point with your right hand?
No, okay. I don't. I'm not that great yet.
Okay. Well, you're awesome, so that's what we expect. So, Anyways, there's all kinds. So let me ask you this, because you guys, I'm bassist as well, right? I come from a bassist background. Randy was a bassist. I think that Kevin was a bassist here. Talk about how the differences between technique, like when you guys pick up a bass versus when you pick up a stick. Like, what's the first thing that comes into your mind? And like Kyle, Dean, that's for both of you guys, really. I'm just kind of curious to know, because I know that you can play it in any role.
Mm-hmm.
Well, why don't you go first, Steve?
Yeah, for me, ever since I picked up the NS, I haven't played bass actually. Not like Gary or Randy, back and forth, or even Kyle, I think plays both. But yeah, I mean, the first thing, of course, is the low action. It's just crazy to think that you can it's so low, and the pickups are so close, and everything just rings out, and so I just have to press that location, and it makes the sound that I always wanted in my head, at least. But the nice thing with the NS, especially, is that it is multi-mode. That you can pluck, do all these things, pluck and slap. That's what really attracted me to the instrument, was that there was a video that Don did, and he's like slapping, he's strumming, he's tapping, he's doing it all, and I was like, that's what I want, and so that's why I made the ultimate jump to it when I purchased it. But
that's what attracted me to the NS over getting, say, like a Grand Stick or the little 10-string.
Yeah, originally I was, this is kind of going to go off on a different topic, which we can revisit later. But yeah, I mean, just the introduction to the stick was, my first introduction was seeing a 12 or 10 string being played. And then going to the website and seeing all the different kinds, and then seeing the NS, and I just related to it right away. It's already tuned the way I understand, and then so I wouldn't have to really relearn that inverted fifths thing.
Did you play a 5 before you got the NS?
Yeah, I always played a 5-string actually. Ever since high school, I've had a 5-string. So yeah, so understanding that low B string wasn't a stretch for me.
Yeah, when to answer Dean's question, when I first got my NS out and started messing with it, I was using a lot higher action. So it took me about the first year I really bumped into the action so I could dig in a little bit more. But as I started getting more and more used to the NS stick, I started lowering the action a little more so I could do a little more with the actual tapping stuff instead of just playing it like an 8-string bass. And So I guess your question, Gene, was how do we think about it when we approach it?
So, so for clarity, like, because I'm a bassist as well, and I always say, Nick's not a bass. And other people say that as well. But it's kind of, I don't want to say it's relegated to that role, but you have the option to play that role. And with the NS, to me, I've played one a couple times every time I pick up an NS stick, I have like people have to wrench it from my hands. I'm always like 4 minutes, and like I'm just starting to figure it out. It's just starting to all come together. So, for people who are in that role, Kyle, I know in your role in Traffic Jam, like you do a really good job of like bass first, right? Like low end first, and Dean, you play in a company a lot, so it seems like same instrument, different roles. And so I suppose my first thought, my first question for you is, Dean, when you pick up the NS, like, what is the bass player in you saying?
The bass player in me?
Yeah.
I love it. I mean, the tone-wise especially, like the tone I'm able to get out of this low end just by tapping is just, and I mean, there's a lot of flexibility in it, and I really like how it comes out, and it's just the tone that's been in my brain for all these years, and trying to get to that this is it, so I'm super happy with that. The bass rolls I've played in the past have never been flashy, have always been the bass, support the low end, lift the song when you need to, bring it back down when you need to, push it a little bit when you need to, pull back, and almost subliminal, and I love that. That's like what I like to do, and this just really supports that for me when I'm playing all the songs.
Kyle, I wanted to, if I could, we have some great stick personalities with us today, and I know that some of you guys got to meet Dean at the Free Hands Academy. I know that Dan was out there and Randy was out there as well. But I was wondering, maybe we could take some questions, Kyle, if you were cool with that.
Oh yeah. Sure, I'll put myself on mute.
Okay.
Could I ask about the pickups?
Sure.
There are two pickups, I guess.
And they're black.
Oh yeah, cool. They are single coils, right?
I actually don't know.
Do they sound like? Does it say EMG on them?
Yeah, these are EMGs.
Okay, they're active then. How many different positions do you have? Do you have kind of run them out of phase and stuff like that?
It's 3 positions, and you only have selection of either one or the other or both at the same time.
All right. Yeah. Chocolate.
Oh, and specifically, this NS was one of the prototypes which Emmett made. I can showcase this. And Don Schiff has the other prototype.
All right.
I didn't come across it just because Emmett wanted to give it to me or anything. It's gone through several hands, and I bought it off of Craigslist. And I don't know why anybody would want to give this up. It's just an amazing instrument with history and knowing. It's so much fun talking with Emmett. He's like, oh, this is why I did this, and this is different, or something like that. And I usually, my brain kind of stops working when he starts talking to me. I'm just like, and Emmett's great. And I love the guy. I mean, it's so much fun to talk to him, and he tells me these things, and he's just a really, really, really sweet guy.
Do you know what wood that is on yours?
What's that?
What wood the body and neck of your NS is?
I don't know. It's I actually chipped it down here, and there's a little bit of, I don't know what it is. I'll have to ask them. One of the things I love about the NS is that as far as functionality and everything goes, there's really not a lot of options to it. There's no pickup options. There's you can get it with a bamboo neck, or I forget what the other options are. This is maybe.
Yours doesn't have pickup options.
Ash?
You're talking about when it's getting made. I thought you were talking about switches on your guitar. So speaking of guitars, I saw also on your blog that you're checking out what's called a U8 guitar.
Wait, I have a blog?
Yeah, well, some blog or something. Something on your Facebook.
Oh, you were checking out my Facebook. Yeah, I was checking out the U8s. I saw that Matt Tate recently got one, and so I probably liked the page or something like that. Yeah. The touch guitar.
Yeah.
I actually saw him play. I saw Marcus Reuter. Is that his name from Stickman?
He's the player of that particular model.
Yeah, he was in Santa Cruz, and I went to see it with another stick player, Grant Stoner, G Stone is his name, and we checked him out, and that was a great show. Tony Levin was actually playing both sides, and we were pretty impressed. And I'm glad Pear got that.
He's good.
Yeah, no, it's funny. Even hearing, I think I've seen some interviews or read some interviews with Tony Levin. And he's like, yeah, I'm actually starting to kind of get good at this thing, and it's a lot of fun to see him play, and it was an extraordinary show. It really was. It was a lot of fun, and so yeah, I did see the U8 there. He played that, but yeah, I don't think I would get into the U8 right now because I like the NS. One of the things about this is that it's got more of a bass spacing on the top 4 strings here. So for those who don't know, the bass strings are wider in space than the bottom strings are. So yeah, so it's got left, right, it's got bass side, melody side, and then you can also choose.
In the 8-string guitar players community, there's a lot of whining about that. You can't get a vocal like solo tone and a non-flubby bass.
Yeah. There's some pretty amazing 8-string players coming out now, and I've seen some videos, and they really have their own sound and everything. But yeah, that's the one thing that I really love about this is that you get that like lead tone, that you can get this and still get that low bass tone as well, and that makes me very happy. Just being able to scream out on one side but still holding that low end. And some of that's attributed to the thickness of the strings, and it does get thinner very quicker than on a normal bass. So, on the G string, for example, when you're slapping it or even tapping it or plucking it, it's thinner than a typical bass G string. So that might be something that a bassist would notice. But in tone-wise, it doesn't seem to suffer at all. And I hear so many stories, especially on Stickist or in person. They'll talk about, hey, how about I tried these strings? So they go out and they buy all these guitar strings and bass strings, and they'll put them on, and then they're like, oh, yeah, it really doesn't sound good. And I talked to Don Schiff about that, and he'd be like, yeah, MS just puts so much time and research into everything about it that it just sounds great as is, So that's what I love is that because I like to think as little as possible, and if I can avoid it, thinking about these things, I'm just grateful. It's just when you go to NS, it's just a medium gauge string, and you just slap them on, forget about it, just go.
Do you mind showing us your pedal board?
Do I? Hold on, let me put this down. All right. Hand's a little shaky, but all right. So there's my pedal board. Can I? So at the heart of it, I have the Pod X3. That's pretty much the heart of it. And then I actually have everything I need to be a one-man band right on the board. And by that I mean I have drums, vocals, and my stick sound all going through this. It's basically those three things all getting mixed in this mixer right here. And my concept, I have a concept. Oh, and by the way, I do have the whammy DT also over here. But my concept is that I would show up at a gig or an open mic, whatever it is. Even though this pedal board is big, I can put it down. I can just prop up my microphone I have right here. I prop that up, I plug it in, I get some power, and then from the mixer, you can see my sock right there, I can just hand the guy one cable or two, because I run everything in stereo, and say, here you go, and then just start playing. You know, everything's pre-mixed. I try my best to get them mixed as best as possible ahead of time. And then, so I just hit go. I have this looper here has my drum loops in it. Using these pedals, I can go up and down, so I have multiple loops for my songs. This looper here is connected to the output of my Pod X3, so that I can loop my stick. And then this one goes together with my vocal processor right here to loop any vocals if I choose to. And these are all synced together to the first drum loop looper. And so everything is in sync. So if I do a stick loop, the start and stop is correct. And you can do multiples of the, so let's say you have like 1 bar loop in the drums, I can still do like 4 bars in this, and it does multiples of this one, so I can still do 4 bars, and then it'll loop perfectly in sync and keep going from there.
So to perform, you don't bring the amps with you. You just plug straight into a PA or whatever is there.
Yeah, right now you can see here I have 2 PA speakers just set up across from me, and that's my gig, my rig right here. But yeah, I don't have an amp. I don't have like the traditional guitar or bass amp or anything like that to hold me down.
You don't
But
find
yeah, I do everything direct.
any compromise?
What's that? Am I compromised?
You don't feel any compromise in tone when you're just going through a PA and there's no bass amp?
No. Actually, my concept, and you probably heard me say concept several times, is that is to use something like a pod or whatever that is out there to have those amp simulators, and that will be my sound. I don't rely, because an external like amp, or I'm getting tired holding this thing. An external amp like a guitar amp or a bass amp, it adds coloration to it, and that's part of the tone. And so I didn't want to have to carry those things, so I decided I'm going to make my tone end here. That's on my pedal board. Anything that comes after that, hopefully will go to something that will replicate it best it can, and that's usually a PA system in a you know, at a club or whatever. And so, you know, I'm not sure if it's really going to be that great, but I have to kind of leave it up to them to, hopefully it is just going to replicate what I'm feeding them.
So I have a F13, line 6 F13. But does the pod have modelers in it? And do you use it?
So I'm using the main guitar type tone for my melody side is something they call the Pod 6 Mood. It's actually a made-up amp sim on that Line 6 made that was like, hey, what's the ultimate grunge type of guitar amp? You know, so they went back and they like morphed all these different things together, and I like it. It seems to be the tone I look for. The bass side, I use the Acoustic 360 cabinet, and it might be like a Mesa amp head. I can't remember right now. But you know, for me, I didn't grow up or using guitar amps and these types of things, so I have no idea what these things sound like. You know, someone says, "Hey, you got to play with a plexi sound," and I'm like, I don't know what that is. You know, so that's kind of the liberating thing with the pod and these kinds of amp simulators, that I just keep turning that knob until I hear something I like, and that's my tone. That's kind of how I go at it. But you know, we'll see what happens when I can't continue to use the pod anymore. At some point, it's going to stop working.
But I guess you'll have to get a new one. So speaking of concepts, I wanted to ask you a little bit about one of your music videos for, I think it's an original of yours, Coming, and you know, the camera in there is going in and out. And I just wanted to talk to you about maybe what the concept behind that was, what the ideas that you were trying to have come through in that.
Yeah, so I had a meeting with the crew. This is the crew. And said, this is the concept. Yeah, no, actually, what happened was I had some ideas, mostly random. I was taking my camera and just recording things and whatever, and none of the shots really worked, and none of them really spoke to me. So I was scrolling through all this stuff. I use iMovie on my Mac. And I was scrolling through. I was like, oh, this is pretty funny. And so I just used that, and I was like, oh, I'm still learning how to use everything. I was like, oh, there's this function I can zoom in and out, and I can make it backwards and flip it and do all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, well, that's fun. And so I just kept doing that over and over. So that video really, conceptually, not too much concept in it, honestly. It was I need a video. I want to put out a video. I need to do something and do it fast. And this is all I have, so just do it. You know, I would love to collaborate with some you know, film artists and see what they come up with. You know, I usually start with some kind of a small idea. And this latest video I did, I just put out a new video earlier this week. And it's a cover tune, and probably from a band nobody knows unless you've been in Rochester, New York 20 years ago. A band named Still Motion. And a friend of mine was playing in that band, and it's a great song. Anyway, it stuck with me. But in that video, there is a concept to that one. And I wrote about it also, that I just had this concept of, people are going to kind of probably laugh at me on this, but it's based on an installation that Yoko Ono did back in 76 or 75 or something, when she met John Lennon. And actually what the installation was, there's a ladder, and you climb up it, and there's as they call it, a spyglass, or a what is that called, magnifying glass, and you look up on the ceiling, and you just look, and you can see these words, and there's a word there, and the word was yes. And as John Lennon says, he's like, yeah, that was, you know, if it was anything else, like, you know, he said, like, piss off or you know, any other expletive, then he would have just been turned off. But it was such a like giving the finger to the people who are giving the finger, you know, and just being really, you know, positive, being like, hey, I'm not mainstream, but I'm not mainstream either, you know, I'm doing my thing. And just the positivity of that, that story stuck with me, and that's why on that video you'll see it zoom in, and then you'll see the word yes, and then it'll zoom back out, and then somewhere else. And I've always had that concept, but of course I just don't have enough pictures or videos and stuff to work off of, and I'm not very experienced at this whole thing, so I just use that picture. I just use the same picture and put that word in multiple places, and just went with it on that one.
Cool. Well, that's good to know a little more about that. And when I watch that video, it's not as random to me anymore.
Yeah, but I would love to get a real video person to help me out with certain video concepts eventually. But hey, like that's what's so great about the stick and the community is we're all a bunch of DIY kind of people. We have to just do what we can, and I think that's true just in like music in general and art in general. Is we're recording our own music, we're mixing it ourselves, we're mastering it, we're trying to make music videos and do everything else. So
especially an open territory like tapping instruments.
Yeah.
There's a lot of possibilities, and I think the people who really dig in and go at it in this community are open to it.
The community is great because the whole stick and the newness of it is very isolating in certain ways, because you're sitting there, you're playing, and I remember kind of coming up with like that slapping technique we talked about earlier, and I'm like, that is so awesome. And anybody see that? Anybody? And I'm just like, yeah, woo, So it's so great to have the stickist.com forums, these freehands videos, and just going out to Freehands Academy was a big step for me actually back in 2013 when I've only played for was it like 6 or 8 months at that point, and I was nervous about going because I wasn't playing. I played a few songs at that point, but meeting other people and just getting the encouragement to continue on and knowing that there's a real community based around is just a wonderful thing and just kept me going.
I'm going to add a little bit, if I may. The first year, Dean was with ARJ, who was also an NS player. I think Randy was also, at the time, an NS player. And then we had you and Dawn, but we didn't have Gary there at that time. This last year, we had Gary and Dawn and yourself and Nathan as well. And we had our first NS stick night, and it was really, really great to see Dean out there and with Gary and Pavilion Setar. He has, and Gary just runs mono and does all the loopings and has a whole different kind of approach to the instrument. And then Nathan is this singer-songwriter who plays these walking bass lines and accompanies himself and has this, I think he was using an H2500X as well. But you just had such a breadth, and then you had Don, playing his songs, his original songs, and singing as well. And you had such a wide breadth of players and ages and familiarity and techniques and approaches to the instrument, kind of what you guys have been saying all along, is there's a lot of space for NS players. And really, there's less than, I think, 350 in existence. And so there's not that many people out there doing it, and those that are, there's a lot of kind of frontier out there to explore. And it's, there's minor advancements in the NS, like with the way the fret rods are set up right now, and the fact that Gary's using 2 different colors. So really, it's kind of left to, until like an aluminum NS comes out, right? But a lot of that kind of ingenuity is left to the player. We still have a little bit of time, but I suppose, Kyle and Dean, something I wanted to ask you guys. Well, first of all, I wanted to make sure that Per and Kevin and Damon, if you guys had any questions for Dean, make sure you ask them.
No, I'm fine. I was just curious about the pickups and electronics inside the instrument.
Oh, okay.
And it's great that it's so simple. I like that.
Yeah.
Rob, you want to take that? You want to talk about the pickups?
Oh yeah, I was just gonna jump in if y'all don't mind. the NS has 4 EMG front tele pickups. That's the same pickups that are in the active 2 block, with 1 per side. In the NS stick, you have 2 per side, so you can think of it a bit like a Telecaster, where you have 2 single coils, and they can you have them individually or together. I don't know in terms of polarity if it's actually humbucking in the NS stick when they're together, but I think it is. So what you have that is basically that arrangement on both sides, and you have the 3 position selector for each side, plus the uh, dual mono or summed mono switch, which in stick parlance is stereo or mono switch. In terms of modifications, if you're interested, we have some complicating factors. First is, I think you could probably get away with a phase switch just fine per side. But I don't think you could do anything in terms of combining the sides, switching that way, because that would affect the way they sum. But also, in terms of headroom for a series switch on the pickups on each side, so for instance the melody sides in series, I don't think you could do that, because the pickups have to go through a preamp because they're active pickups. But then you have the EQ section, which is treble and bass per side. If that's an active EQ section, then the voltage in that EQ section determines the headroom, and if you put them in series, that may be way too much voltage going into the active preamp, active EQ section. So all of that is a very rambling affair to say that the typical guitar modding kind of stuff you might do probably doesn't apply to the NS stick at all, but contact Stick Enterprises for more information. And if they can tell you like how it's built in terms of voltages and in terms of what's PCB, what's not, then you can come to me and I'll go full on Frankenstein.
Yeah, I think it's pretty optimal. Personally, I like parallel pickups much better. I never put them in stereo. So
I wanted to another question, and Kyle and Dean, I may have muted you there. Can you guys see if you can unmute yourself?
Yeah, you muted me. I'm muted now.
So, Dean, I wanted, we've got Damon on the line as well. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about, and Kyle, I'm sorry to jump in, just like more about me. But what intrigues me about Dean Kobayashi is his sense of community. So, Dean was the first guy to sign up for FHA 2014, and so he got the kind of the feature spot with Emmett, and Gary, and Bob, and Greg, and Steve, and Gail, and so I was very pleased that he had that opportunity. But also the fact that that you work with some of the stick players, and you can tell us who they are and how we might know them on the Stickist in the Northern California stick circle.
Yeah, so we got the NorCal, or Bay Area Stick Circle, I think is what it's called now. We've got Jonathan Korn, who I met at Freehands 2014. He and let's see, we also have Damon Said, and Damon, I can't remember what your username was. By the way, Jonathan on Stickist is Hedgehog. Mine is Skydiver. We also have JRJ, John Johnson. Grant Stoner, who is not on Stickist, but he uses the name G Stone. He does a couple. He makes some little albums once in a while. He just put out a new one actually. And then Diana Amar, who has been at the Free Hands Academies. I think I already said Damon. Yeah, Damon said he's Nomad Monday on Stickist. Am I missing anybody?
Wasn't there a new guy, a guy that hadn't played a stick before that showed up for one of your earlier sessions?
Yeah, at the last one, Phil, I can't remember his last name, I apologize to Phil, but yeah, he knows JRJ and actually borrowed a stick from JRJ to see if he likes it, but he's already been doing a lot of tapping on the guitar, so he showed some of that to us too. That was really, really a treat to watch him play. Previous to the Bay Area Stick Circle, in 2013, after coming back from FHA 2013, I got together with Jared J, Grant Stoner, and Diana, and myself. The four of us got together probably about every 2 to 4 months apart to just kind of get together, have a time to play together. We would usually meet at someone's house, have drinks, play, drink some more, and we would step away and we'd have some wonderful food, usually like spaghetti or tacos, or but it was still great food, homemade food, and then we'll go back and play some more. If it's at someone's house, we would just crash there, and it was just an amazing experience. The focus of that wasn't to have a stick-centered thing, but more of a solo artist thing. And so we kept that open, and that's actually morphed into something called Solo Utopia. JRJ really does more of the interacting at this point, and we have spoken word storytellers, we have guitarists, percussion, all these types of people are in it. It has become an invite-only thing, just because there's like a limited space to do stuff usually. But when I was at Freehands 2014, and Tony Levin introduces me and says, "Here's Dean from Northern California Stick Circle," and it's funny because right before that I spoke to him and he's like, "Hey, I heard you have this stick circle in Northern." I was like, "I don't really have a stick circle. It really isn't one. I have this other thing." He introduced me that way anyway, and then Jonathan contacts me later on after the Freehands and says, "Hey, is this a real thing?" And I'm like, "It can be. Yeah, let's do it."
That's just marketing.
Yeah. So we're like, let's do it. So our first meeting with the Stick Circle was just Damon and Jonathan and I, just the three of us. Then we just had our second one back in, I can't remember now, a month or two ago. And at that one, JRJ, Grant, and Phil, and myself, and Hedgehog King. Damon wasn't at that one, but I hope Damon will be there tomorrow. We're having our next one, and it's open to everybody. It's really open to anybody who plays the stick, who is interested in the stick, who just wants to listen to people playing the stick, but it's centered around the stick. So if anybody's interested in that, hit me up. You can find me on Facebook or stickus.com, and we're always looking for new people to show up. And it's really to just build this community of stick people, just people who are just interested and want to find out about the stick, and just kind of spread that word as well, so everybody can enjoy it.
Yeah, that's cool, man. That's cool. I mean, that's really it's so nice to have that option, because that first step with a $2,000, $3,000, or even $4,000 instrument, that first step's a big one, and you may not dig it at all. And granted, they do retain a lot of their value. If you did want to put it out there, if you purchased one that was used, you could probably sell it, and maybe give or take $100 to get what you put into it. But I thought of Andy Prokopik when you were talking about your basses, how you haven't really picked up your bass since you've been playing the NS. And Andy would kind of kid around about how he would kind of close the closet door so that the basses couldn't see the stick.
Yeah, I have my basses on the wall, and I'll kind of pick it up and pluck it a couple times, and my fingers don't move the same anymore. And but I have a lot of sentimental value in them, so I've only owned 2 basses my whole life, and I have them both, and I hesitate to get rid of them. One's on loan to Grant right now because he wants to try it out, but yeah. Yeah, and I mean the groups, I started on a totally selfish reason, really, because my goal is to play and play in front of people, but I'm hesitant to go in front of an audience right away, a real audience, even an open mic or anything like that. So I was like, what would be better if I can control the people who are there, not control them, but control the people that will be there. Friends will be there, and I know they'll be supportive and they'll be honest and everything. Because at all these meetings that we have, after you play, we will critique you. It's not oh, that was great, yay. There's a lot of that, but at the same time, hey, that was great, how'd you do that? But hey, you know what, when you did that, I thought maybe this will work better, and it's a really amazing feedback you can get from the group. And if anybody knows JRJ, he'll just tell you straight up what's going on, and he's just full of love and happiness, but just total honesty. Some of the critiques, first Free Hands Academy, 2013, we got to play in front of all the teachers, including Emmett, and I don't know, Gene, if you remember what he said after I played. He's like, Dean, you should do like a comedy act. It would be great. I'm like, hey, thanks, man. But he's like, no, like your personality comes through, and keep that. That's what's great. We can work on the playing. But that's really what his message, I think, was. But nothing is said in to hurt anybody. It's all just really constructive criticism that goes on.
I remember that very well. Our first day at the Free Hands Academy 2013 was fantastic because there's like 5. It's you and me and Brett and Claire and Evan and Grant. And we were all there, and I think that Vlad from Russia had joined us as well. And we barely knew each other's names, but we were saying, "Oh, you're skydiving." Oh, okay. Oh, and I had met JRJ out at the, I've told the story so many times. I met him out at Bob Culbertson and Tom G's event out in 2010, out in Southern California, like the San Diego area, and I remember JRJ left a really big impression on me. We had been trading messages on the Stickist, and we traded sticks. I had a 12-string Paducah with an active 2, black linear fret inlays, and he had the same thing, but it was a 10-string. He had white inlays, and he was a little bit hesitant, and I was a little bit hesitant, and we traded the first night just to see what it was like. And he loved that I had light gauge strings. He loved that I had different tuning, and and after that, from that moment on, that became my main stick, and still is my main stick. And I moved to medium gauge on his kind of suggestion, but also one thing I remember, Evan was very new to the Chapman stick, and he broke out his red railboard and just totally blew everyone away. And then, Evan felt really good, and it gave him this good feeling, and he was, with friends. And I remember what JRJ, I don't remember what JRJ said. He's like, "Hey, man, we don't judge." And I was like, "Yeah, we don't judge. That's cool. We're just here to, hang out and figure out how to tune this thing and kind of get along. And even if you showed up with, a banjo, it'd still be like, cool, man, show us something." It didn't matter that it was the Chapman stick.
Yeah.
It could have been a convention of plumbers or, whatever, people that were selling Bibles. It didn't matter. We would somehow have found that collection of people, this collection of people, would have somehow found a way to come together and to share their feelings and emotions.
Totally believe that, yeah.
Yeah, so I suppose, Kyle, I wanted to check in with you really quickly. We're almost at time, but I wanted to make sure that we hit on everything that you were looking to cover with Dean.
Yeah, I think so. Let me check back on my questions here. I wrote out some questions. Yeah, I mean, we covered pretty much everything.
Cool. So let me ask the question, Kyle. I'll ask it if it's okay. Dean, what advice do you have for not only, I suppose, primarily NS players? If I'm a bassist or I'm a guitarist and I'm thinking about picking up an NS, what advice do you have for me?
It's a good question. I have, as you probably heard, I have a lot of concepts in mind, and so my recommendation or piece of advice would be to understand the concept that you're looking for. What are you trying to accomplish in the very end? So first, is the stick right for you? And I think it is right for just about anybody. By the way, I think it's an amazing instrument. But each instrument is different for everybody. Some people just really take to certain instruments, and some people don't. And it's the same for I think for the stick as well. But if you have a concept nailed down, in which, in my mind, my concept was, I want to play some lead lines. I want to play some screaming guitar tones over these nice bass tones, and and I want to sing, and I want to do all these things at the same time. How am I going to accomplish this? And that's when I came across a stick, or it came back into my mind. I've seen it before. And I was like, oh, I can do all that, and then that's where the journey really starts, right? And so that's my recommendation, is to understand. And then when you pick up the stick, know that it's not going to come to you right away. Especially with like the traditional stick, with the inverted fifths and things like that, you really have to take your time and understand the concept behind it, because it's an amazing idea. It really is. For me, it wasn't for me. For me, I've been playing bass for 20 years. I like the fourths tuning. I relate to it. I can pick that up, and I was like, okay. But when I did get the stick, this is what I did with it. I would sit in front of the TV, and I would have it on me, and I would just sit there, and I would, most of the time, just kind of sit there and hold it and understand, like, get used to feeling the stick, because it feels funky. I mean, it's wide neck. If you sit it with it between your legs, it's kind of an odd feeling to have something there sometimes. It's all these things that, and you want to play it lighter. You don't want to be slamming on this thing. And so just really get to know your stick a little better. This is getting really weird.
Phrasing, all right? Phrasing. But, it sounds like having a vision for what you hope to accomplish with it.
Yeah,
right?
and then keep working towards it. That's really what it is don't give up. And it's going to be tough. And there'll be times you'll put it down for a week or two, but pick it back up and just know it's a very different thing, and to understand that feel, and the how it'll feel in your fingers, and feel on your shoulder. And everybody's different too, and that's what I love about it. Is Don plays more like a guitar, like a bass guitar, like this, where I play it more vertically. I have the strap kind of low, and because I think it looks cooler, but like Don, his concept is he wants to play it like this, and so when he stands up, it stays there, like it doesn't move on him. Like he can sit down and stand up, and it'll still be at that same height for him. But yeah, I remember back when I was playing bass in the band in LA, we were I used to play up higher, like that. But then they're like, dude, you got to bring it down. Like it doesn't look good. And I was like, okay. And so I started that, and I was like, okay, I'll wear it lower. You got to look good too,
Yeah. We had Dawn on 2 nights ago. So Rob and I did a full-on interview with the rocket scientists, which will add and air as I think the first week in March. So after this one rolls out, we'll do Dr. Froth next Friday, and then all the guys from the rocket scientists. So you're in good company. Kyle, Dean, we've got some excellent NS stuff on board, and I'd love to. If any of you guys want to be around for next week for Michael, I hope you let me know. I had intended to kind of chat with him myself, but if either of you are available, I'd love to have you come on and host the show again. Kyle or Dean, if you're around, please let me know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because he's doing straight up metal. 6 minute century is just unbelievable. So, yeah. Well, listen, I want to take a moment here to thank you, Kyle, for starters. Thank you very much for making time. I know that Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays probably a busy day for you, and I'm so glad to see you again and see that things are going well. And I knew that you'd have some good questions that Rob and I wouldn't think of, to ask as an NS player.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me back, Gene.
Absolutely. There, sir. Always a pleasure to see you. Always just great. You put more wear on that thing. I didn't think it was possible, but I'm seeing less and less of the die now. All right, you gotta get out. Kevin, Rob, thanks a lot, and Dean, of course. Many thanks to you. I always look forward to your videos. I always look forward to your good cheer and what you're up to creatively. So please, keep all that good stuff coming, and keep us posted on the NorCal, on the the Bay Area stick player stuff, that's important work that you're doing. So I always look forward to that.
Yeah, like us on Facebook. Just go on Facebook, look up Bay Area Stick Circle, and like us on there.
Got it. Got it. Cool. Well, listen, guys. Happy Free Hands Friday. Thanks again for tuning in. We'll see you next week with Michael Millsap.
Bye.
Cheers.